Good afternoon, everybody. This is Cedric Remo from the Climate Bonds Initiative. Welcome to our webinar on Nepal. We just leave it maybe 1 minute for other people to join. So we will start with a round of presentations, both from the panelists and from each individual person. What we want to do is to really have a session where people feel free to ask questions. It's very important. It's a sharing of experience and knowledge. We have some very distinguished panelists today to respond to all the questions. So hopefully we will have ample time to discuss all of this. And first of all, I will let Sundeep Subba do a short introduction. Please, Sundeep.
All right, thank you so much, Cedric. So welcome and good afternoon from Nepal to everyone who's joined this webinar. So just to set the context of this webinar, actually, this is a joint collaboration between the Climate Bond Initiative and UNDP established green finance platform for Nepal under Sustainable Development Goal. So then we've been discussing how to, sensitize the topic and what can be done towards the green finance landscape in Nepal. So early this year, we had our first meeting of the platform in Kathmandu, where about 26 people had, the member had joined the meeting. And we discussed a variety of areas where Nepal could profit from the Green Finance Initiative. So this webinar is, from my perspective, is like a sequence to what we have been doing. And thank you to Climate Bond Initiative and also to UNESCAP and the UNDP Nepal for making this happen. So the whole idea today is what would be the opportunity for Nepal in terms of the green finance and the green bond, or how could we leverage, our position, and how could we profit, and because there's capital issues in Nepal for most of the financial sector, and the FDI has been a major, opportunity as well as the stumbling block, and then the COVID-19. Where almost like 350,000 of our small entrepreneurs to large cooperative, large corporate has been suffering, and almost about 3 million jobs are at stake inside the country. So under this backdrop, what can be done? So maybe perhaps a green bond or green finance could serve as one of the opportunity for Nepal. So this is where we plan to discuss in next 1 hour or so. To start, then maybe perhaps before we get into the other discussion, maybe let me request all the participants to introduce themselves. So again, I'm Sundeep Subba. Today, my capacity here in this platform is as a chairperson of UNDP SDG Green Finance Platform for Nepal. So over to the next participant to introduce briefly and what do you expect from today's session.
Hello, good afternoon to all. My name is Souvik Chandra. I am entrepreneur. I am from India and keen to attend this program. Actually, Dr. Masato Abe is my friend, and with his invitation, I came here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Next, please. Mr. Badri Gohagan.
Namaste to everyone. My name is Badri Guragai. I work as a CEO at National Cooperative Bank Limited in Nepal, and I'm today first time joining this webinar to learn about the green bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Sushama, please. Hello.
I think Susma ji, are you there? She's a women entrepreneur, and she's also the vice chair of this platform, but I think she's still muted. Maybe we can move to the next gentleman, Rupesh Casey.
Hello, good afternoon. I am Rukesh Kesi. I am from Securities Board of Nepal. Securities Board of Nepal is the apex regulator of securities and commodity derivative market of Nepal. Today, I want to learn about the practices related to the green bond in the ASEAN countries.
Thank you very much. Welcome, sir. Next one, please.
Thank you.
The Balram Poda.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm Sushma Sharma. I'm woman entrepreneur, and also I'm a co-chair of this UNDP Green Finance platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Cedric.
Hi, this is Balram Paudel from UNDP country office, and I look after results and partnership. I'm a results and partnership lead. So looking forward to hear the very interesting topics and to learn from it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Mr. Singh, Vijaya Singh. You're on mute, sir.
Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Please go ahead. We can hear you now, sir.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm late. I just joined now.
So what do you do?
Just give me a minute. I just need to set up.
Okay,
yeah.
next one, please.
Sorry, Vijay Singh, Vijay sir, yes. Vijay sir is the
okay.
UNDP.
Yeah, let me introduce myself. I'm Vijay Singh, working for UNDP Nepal country office. I'm a resilience advisor for UNDP Nepal. I have been working on climate finance, climate risk management, environment, natural resource management, as well as disaster risk reduction for a couple of years. Currently, I am supporting the process of national stakeholder engagement in different areas of the SDG, and one of the areas is the green financing, where Mr. Subba is supporting us to set up a sub-platform on green financing in Nepal. The whole objective of this financing is basically to agree on some financing tools which can attract financing for developing the green job, the green enterprise, or green infrastructure, whatever you want to make it, so that it could contribute to the transformation of the country's economy towards the green economy in the long term. But in the short term, when we are looking at the SDG achievements, we want to work with the financing institutions and other institutions available in the country to set up a such kind of tool. That tool can be useful to finance some green businesses in the country. That is where I want to. Yeah.
Thank you. Next person, please. NBA Nepal.
That's the Nepal Bankers Association. CEO of Nepal Banker Association is, are you there, Anilji?
Okay. I think there's no one there. Suman Basnya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Suman Basnet. I am finance and investment consultant by profession, and currently I am with UNCDF helping in their assignment of GCF, PSF, private sector finance accessing project, which is being done in collaborations with UNDP and UC Mode. So I've been on a climate finance platform from a national perspective from the beginning when the GCF had initially started its presence. So green bond is one of the interest area in terms of accessing finance for the private sector. So that is that's why I am interested to know about the aspect better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one, please, Mr. Ken Vidi.
Ken Vidi SA. Yeah, there's no response. So Prithu Sharma. Prithuji?
Namaste, good afternoon. I'm Prithu Sharma Binari from Nepal Rashtra Bank. I'm attending on behalf of Bank and Financial Institution Regulations Department.
So that is our central bank in Nepal. Nepal Rashtra Bank is the central bank.
Okay. Next one, please. Bal Gauti.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Bal Gharti from Banking and Insurance Management. Banking and Insurance Management is carrying out research activities for the SDG sub-platform on green financing. Thank you.
Thank you. Where are we now? Shaili Rimau.
Good afternoon. My name is Shaili Rimal. I'm here on Mr. Sandeep Subba's invitation. I work with him in the Financial Sector Stability Program here in Nepal. And I'm eager to learn about the status of green bonds in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Sundeep Shrestha or Shrestha.
Namaste, I'm Sundeep. I work for Dolma Impact Fund in Nepal. We work a lot with DFIs like FMO, OEB, FinFund, CDC sort fund. So we are really interested in taking this to the next level. So I'm here as invited by Sandeep Sir to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Next one, Aiko Akiyama. Hello.
Yes. Oh, hi. My name is Aiko Akiyama. I'm from a social development division of UNSCAP. I'm here. Generally, I work on issues of persons with disabilities, but today I like to learn from about the topic in the spirit of SDG implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Next, Aliska Bhattacharya.
Hello everyone, my name is Bhattacharya and I'm from UNDP, where I work as the Head of Solutions Mapping. I'm very excited and looking forward to today's webinar on the potential of green bonds in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Next one, Bo Rajpat, please.
Bhoj Raj
Hello. Hello and good afternoon, all of you. I am from NRB, the Central Bank of Nepal. I'm currently working at Foreign Exchange Management Department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, sir. Next, Prajwal Lake.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Prajwal Lake, representing Nepal Bankers Association on the behalf of my CEO, Anil Sharma sir. He's busy in another meeting, so I'm attending on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Next, Yankee Ukiap.
Yes, Cedric, thank you. This is Yankee Ukiab. I'm a development economist at UNDP Nepal, and I'm very looking forward to these insights because this will inform, UN's and UNDP's larger socioeconomic recovery framework that's currently being discussed. And I think this, with regarding green recovery, I'm really looking forward to some of the insights from this webinar. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Next person, please. Saroj Dakal. Hello.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Saroj. I am an independent researcher, and I had made a presentation on green bond in Nepal in one of the construction summit in different city, Pokhara. And I'm new to the ongoing subject. The ongoing coordination between stakeholders. Yeah, I'm eager to learn about the green bond in Nepal perspective.
Thank you. Welcome. I think I lost track now of who we haven't heard. Maybe Suresh Thapa?
Yes, thank you very much. Suresh Thapa from National Cooperative Federation of Nepal. And we are also working on the SDG goal number 13, and now I am representing on behalf of the chairman of NCF. He's now quite busy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Well, I don't know if I have forgotten anyone. If I have, is the time to raise your hand. Otherwise, yes, please, Mr. Rastra.
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I joined a bit late. I work at the International Institute of Green Finance in Beijing. I'm Nepalese, currently interning at the Asian Development Bank. I just heard about the program 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
So honored to be here. Yeah, nice meeting you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So let me please now turn to our panelists today for this presentation. I would like to introduce, first of all, Professor Masato Abe from UNESCAP. Can you please shortly introduce yourself of what you're currently working on?
Thank you, Cedric. I'm Masato Abe from the United Nations ESCAP, located in Bangkok, Thailand. Currently, I'm responsible for the broad issues under the financing for development in Asian Pacific, which including the climate finance, green bond, and the infrastructure financing, and also inclusive financing for smaller business like SMEs and women entrepreneurs. Right? Today, I'm very happy to be with the many of my long time, the friend, like Mr. Chandra from the India, and you kindly, recognize me, earlier. Thank you so much. And so many, the people. And I've been working with the Nepal since 2007. I visited my first time, the Nepal Kathmandu, the 2007. And based on the my wish to meet with my former supervisor at the UN, Mr. B.P. Dungana. He used to be the very famous economist, and I believe that he's still active in the Kathmandu as the respected, the senior economist for Nepal. So I was trained under him. Since then I have had the very close kind of relationship and also engagement, particularly with the Nepal and the Nepalese. Okay. So today, I would like to more focus on to the bond capital, bond market development, in addition to the climate finance, because without the bond market, right, the working enabling environment or the bond market, it's a bit difficult to, the move to the more advanced, green bond. So I would like to talk a bit about my view towards the how to strengthen, develop the bond market in Nepal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like now to introduce my colleague, Sundeep Bhattacharya from the Climate Bonds Initiative based in Mumbai. Sundeep, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I work for the India program of Climate Bonds Initiative. So as you might be knowing, India has had a few green bonds from public sector units, then after that from renewable energy developers. And I've of late been involved in some issues in Bangladesh and Nepal as well. Great to be here. Thanks everyone for having me here.
Thank you very much, Sundeep. And finally, my other colleague, Queen, please, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. Namaste. Nice to meet all of you today. I'm a Queen based in Ho Chi Minh City, working in Climate Bond Initiative for ASEAN Green Finance Project. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. So let's start with a short presentation on the green bond market, because this is the topic that unites us today. Climate Bonds Initiative, very briefly, is a not-for-profit organization which has been constituted on behalf of investors and issuers globally to support the emergence of green bonds as a tool to finance climate-aligned projects. And since the Paris Agreement in 2015, this segment of the bond market has seen a very strong growth, as you can see from this chart that I'm showing on the screen. The amounts of issuance have really continued to rise since 2015 to reach $250 billion globally in 2019. A very strong growth. And if it was not for the COVID-19 situation that we are experiencing, this growth should continue. We see a number of reasons for that. So globally, the total outstanding of green bonds is about 1% of the total size of the bond market. The bond market itself is about $100 trillion of outstanding. The green bond market is approaching 1 trillion of this 100 trillion. And if we look at the various parts of the world, it's mostly driven by Europe, where there is very strong growth, but also Asia Pacific as the second largest region in the world. And then North America, with Latin America and Africa representing still only a very small amount. So in Asia Pacific, the big markets are most of all China, followed by Japan, Australia, and India. And Southeast Asia as well is seeing some strong growth as well, which I will show you in a minute. In ASEAN, last year, in 2019, we reached $8 billion of issuance, which was twice as much as the amount that was issued in 2018. And these green bonds are issued by non-financial corporates and financial corporates mostly, but also from banks through green loans and sovereign issuance as well. So there is a number of issuers that can come to market to issue green bonds. And green bonds essentially are very normal bonds. They look, in terms of securities, very similar to normal bonds, except that the definition of how the capital is going to be used is very precise, and this must go to specific projects that are aligned with the objectives of the Paris Agreement if they are to receive our certification from Climate Bonds Initiative, or some other definitions of green projects if we follow other definitions. So in Southeast Asia, where Quinn and myself are mostly active, and I guess Sundeep can also share some information about the situation in India, but in Southeast Asia, we see quite a big diversity in terms of green bonds being issued. And that makes it quite interesting in terms of how active the market is. For example, Indonesia has issued sovereign green sukuk, which is an Islamic type of securities, for $1.75 billion. Plus some banks as well have issued in Indonesia, making the total of almost $3 billion. Singapore has seen quite a bit of issuance, but mostly from the green loan side, mostly from banks for the real estate sector. In Malaysia, we have seen some corporates and banks issuing green securities, but also in an Islamic format. So there has been a number of green sukuks for renewable energy and real estate projects. In the Philippines, the green bonds have been mostly directed towards renewable energy and residential buildings, and mostly from corporates. In Thailand, we had a large issue from the BTS group, which runs the transportation system in Bangkok, the BTS train. And in Vietnam, although the amounts were small, we had 2 issues from the local municipalities for water projects. So this is a region which is a lot of activity, different types of securities and different types of issuers. That makes it quite interesting. And it demonstrates how even countries that have relatively less developed bond markets can also start engaging with this movement of issuing green bonds. So how does a green bond differentiate itself from a normal bond? There is a number of extra steps in order to call it a green bond. First of all, in the preparation of the green bond, there must be a selection of specific assets that meet relevant criteria and we need to document those projects. We need to create what we call a green bond framework, which sets out how the proceeds of the bond will be used. This framework must then be reviewed by an independent party, which we call a verifier. So by issuing a second party opinion, that's the term of the report that this verifier is producing, investors will be able to assess whether the projects selected are indeed compliant with the criteria. So the issuer needs to retain a verifier. It has a small fee attached to it, but there will be a pre and a post-issuance report that will be issued and provided to investors to indicate the nature of the projects. At this stage, an issuer can also seek the certification that we provide at Climate Bonds Initiative, which is an extra level of disclosure and an extra level of, if you want, trust within investors. If that's the case, the verifier must be an approved verifier by Climate Bonds Initiative. We have selected a number of providers around the world that are able to deliver this certification. And they must demonstrate a certain level of competency in the bond markets, as well as understand our taxonomy. And they will submit a report to our certification team based in London. And then we will issue this certification to the issuer, which can be used and distributed to investors. Once this certification is issued, the bond can carry on and be launched to the market. And after the issuance, the certification can be then confirmed once the proceeds of the bond have been released for the specific projects that were part of the selection. And after that, we ask issuers to report every year on how they have allocated the funds. There is a certain time period for an issuer to be allocating the capital that they receive from the investors to the projects they have selected. So this is a fairly organized process. There is already a number of verifiers that have issued their SPOs, and it's becoming a very regular process. We interact with them very often, and as the standards themselves are evolving, we also interact with the verifiers on how they can use the new standards. So standards are usually categorized by industry sectors. For our taxonomy, for example, we have a standard for solar energy, for residential buildings, for commercial buildings. We even have some standards for shipping or land use and so on. So this is, some of it is still work in progress. For example, the hydropower standard is under review and will come out soon, but there is already a lot of different criteria that have been published and that are freely available on our website, climatebonds.net. So if you are curious about any type of projects on whether they qualify with our certification, you can consult this criteria as well. Apart from the climate bond standard, there is a number of initiatives around the world to develop specific taxonomies. And the most important ones are two of them, the one developed in the EU and the one developed in China. The one developed in the EU is actually quite advanced. It's just been approved by the European Union and Parliament. So it's going to be mandatory for new green bonds to comply with this green taxonomy. And it goes into specific sectors as well. And it puts some very precise thresholds on some of them on what can be considered as green. For example, for solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, whether gas can be included or not, for buildings and so on. So it's quite, the technical document itself is quite complex. It needs a thorough review whenever a project is considered. And that's why the role of the verifier is very important as well. For bonds that are issued, for example, in China, in the domestic market, they are subject to a domestic taxonomy. they have several regulators as well in China, which can have slight differences between the way they treat their own definitions. In some countries, there are some efforts underway to develop a local taxonomy as well, which can be relevant for local context. In Malaysia, for example, there is also a specific way of looking at the sustainability framework and so on. So there is always the question of whether the country needs to adapt the global standard to the local context, or whether the global definitions can apply. This is a decision to be made by each country individually, but we encourage any new standard to try to converge towards the global ones, because that makes the understanding by investors much easier. So the promise of the green bond is really to support the development of a greener and a more climate-aligned economy. It starts with some critical sectors like the energy sector, where renewable energy sees a lot of issuance of green bonds. The other one is buildings, where the emergence of green buildings is really a strong driver of the global green bond market. And transportation is another one. The low carbon transport from the rail, for example, is also an area where there's a lot of investment in infrastructure, and that's where green bonds can come as a support to finance those projects as well, like we've seen in Thailand, for example, with the BTS. Maybe at this stage, it's good to turn back the floor to you, all participants, if there are specific questions that you will want to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Cedric. So some people are sending me WhatsApp messages that there's no chat box, right? So they can speak directly if they have any question.
Yes, please.
I think so. So if there are any specific questions from the participant side, the audience side, this is your opportunity to ask the question. So anyone?
Hi, Cedric. This is Balram.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Cedric. This is Balram from UNDP Nepal office.
Yes, nice to meet you.
So
please go ahead.
Just to learn more, like who issue these bonds, and then that's the first question, and then second, how I understand that these are traded in the stock market, and then is it for general public, or there are, how does they look like, so and if you have any simple examples, since we don't have that in Nepal, so I'm really trying to understand, we do have a primary, stock market, but we don't have bond markets yet. So
yes, maybe I will invite my colleague Sundeep to talk about the different types of green bonds that we see being issued, for example, in India. Sundeep?
Hi. So thanks, and thanks for the question. So we have in India, we have issuances from financial institutions, from renewable energy companies, and the rest you can say is a bit of a miscellaneous. So there is no restriction about who can issue and who cannot issue. There is no, anybody who can issue a bond can issue a green bond, but financial institutions generally dominate, not because of anything else, but because finance money is their raw material, so they need to borrow money with from a lot of sources and have diversification of sources of funds. So you will generally see a lot of financial institutions borrowing through green bonds, and in the case of Nepal as well, the first green bond which is being worked upon is also from a financial institution, is the National Infrastructure Development Bank. Since Nepal has a lot of hydropower, that is the asset behind it. Another thing which I've been sounded out by 2 or 3 people, is an energy efficient bond, if possible. That is about, the brick kilns. The brick kilns in Nepal, they don't have that, what do you say, the way of circulating the heat, recirculating the heat, reusing the heat for the bricks. So that equipment is being put up, and I got some queries about whether that can be done by a bond. So these are the 2 things which have come to my notice about how green bonds can be applicable in Nepal. Though I must say that the brick kilns, the energy efficiency of brick kilns one will most probably not suffice as per our own standards. So I hope I've answered the question to some extent.
Thank you very much, Sundeep. In Southeast Asia, we see a number of different companies looking at green bonds. Some have already come to market, some are government owned, but some are privately owned as well. So what we see is that, it doesn't really matter what type of issuer to come to market. I think there is an opportunity for different types of entities. And like Sundeep said, financial institutions play a very important role to start this market. But maybe I will turn to Professor Masato Abe. In terms of the work that UNESCAP is doing in the region, what is the opportunity for Nepal, for example, when we see this very strong growth of green bonds globally? How could Nepal really seize this momentum?
I think, thank you, Cedric. And also, first of all, I'd like to appreciate, climate, bond initiative, as well as the UNDP to invite me to the very interesting and timely, the workshop like this. Thank you so much. Yeah. One thing I could say is that, probably using this opportunity with green bond, Nepal capital market, particularly bond market, could, using green bond as leverage to strengthen, bond market itself. Presently, Nepal's bond market is still small, very much dominated by the government, sovereign bond, government bond. Right? And there's still room for the private sector investment, also, the borrowing, the debt, the kind of debt management through the capital market and the bond market is rather small, even compared with some of the neighboring countries. So using this opportunity to, to enhance the relationship between investors and investors and also borrowers, both government, particularly the private sector. Cedric mentioned that most private sector borrowers is a financial institution. That is true. But in addition to financial institutions, there's other agency and particularly private sectors enterprises might join to this market, right? To expanding size of the market and depth. Actually, there is no secondary market as well. And also, but one thing I could say, also compare with the other neighboring countries, Nepal has relatively, the good, the financial banking and the finance sector already, having the adequate set of the policies and the regulations. As you know, the bond market, capital market development started, since 1990s, early 1990s, in Nepal. So Nepal has some experience already, but unfortunately prolonged, the internal conflict, right? Those kind of things. It's the making such a development slow in the past. But now is the time, even though under the coronavirus, pandemic, I think Nepal has a much better position in the next 5 to 10 years to focus on to the bond market development. And the green bond could be one of the vehicle to expanding such a direction. And also, another issue is that relating to this, the size of the market, the depth of the market, and also investor, the borrower, linkage, engagement, I believe that the Nepali government and those private sector need to work for a better environment, policy and the regulatory environment to create the enabling, general enabling business environment. And also enabling banking and financial, environment. Without such an environment, it's a bit difficult, private sector to invest more, to find out the borrower and, finding out the investor. So such a regulatory issues, including taxation. I think Nepali government needed to think about the kind of a taxation to the bond market as well. Right? So far, there's not really much big market. So not really many, people make their noise. However, once, right, the bond market is expanding, such a taxation issue could be the one of the very severe, bottleneck. And the third point is that, the facilitation, like, the ICT, the application, fintech kind of thing to providing the, the better transparent, enabling the governance structure using more ICT system, right? Nepal is a landlocked country. So to deal with such a disadvantage, particularly logistics, I think ICT application, particularly in the banking and the financial sector, and also the bond market, capital market, such issue is very important. Okay, so I want to make the 3 points. The development of the bond market, maybe using the green bond, climate bond, and also providing the better environment to business and the financial sector. And thirdly, using more ICT, fintech application. Okay, those 3 things I want to emphasize now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A bond is a very good instrument to finance, first of all, infrastructure. And I think for a country like Nepal, this is very important because there will be infrastructure that will need to be built, like in many other countries of Asia. And what we see is that there is strong support as well from international organizations to support such infrastructure projects. And that's a very important driver in the development of the green bond market. For example, we see ADB, the Asian Development Bank, or IFC, participating in new green bonds being issued by, for example, being the anchor investor in those bonds that facilitates their issuance. And after, it's usually for the first issue, and then after, when new issues of the same issuer come to market, it makes it easier because investors know about this issuer. So there is strong support for international organization. And we see other types of markets that also don't have a very active bond market start to develop. For example, Cambodia had its first corporate bond issued last year. In Myanmar, there is no bond market as well. But yet, last year, we saw 2 Singaporean banks propose a green loan to a real estate group in Myanmar. And that's the first step towards green bonds being issued in the future. Loans are very often a precursor to bond issuance. Bonds are sometimes issued to refinance existing loans. So we see some developments in similar markets in the region that are also not developed. And there are some initiatives underway to create this infrastructure that is needed to develop the bond market. For example, the ASEAN +3 Bond Market Forum is a platform where regulators, central banks, and market practitioners are coming together to define what is needed to develop the bond market, as was referred before. Maybe I could turn to Sandeep for a few minutes. What is your view on the opportunity of the green bonds in Nepal? Where should the efforts be focused on?
Thank you, Cedric. I think it was a pretty good discussion. So from my perspective, actually, I was going to raise a few questions, particularly from the enabling environment perspective, the kind of the ecosystem that Nepal as a nation need to build around the, creating of a green bond. As Mr. Masata Abe rightly pointed out, the bond market in Nepal is at a, mostly heavily dominated by sovereign bond and lately with the debentures, but these are not traded pretty actively. So we didn't have a much deeper market into the bond itself, but that should not deter us from moving, because the initial goal here is, from my perspective, is to try to raise the, get the attention of the international investor who would, be willing to invest in Nepal brand green bond, particularly from the environmental perspective. Right, but now I think from my perspective, some of the that is the region we also have regulators here from the foreign exchange department, from the hedging perspective, the country risk perspective, the absence of country risk rating, and also, and the same Security Exchange Board colleague is also here at this platform. So I'm in touch with a couple of banks, particularly the large state-owned banks, and trying to encourage them. And they're also very optimistic, and they would like to go for the green bond issuance in due course of time. But in a reality check, so what kind of enabling environment do we need, does a country need? So can you perhaps maybe share more perspective into the role of the regulator, central bank, role of the exchange board, role of the government, perhaps to do with the country risk rating, and role of the regulator perhaps to do with the hedging mechanism and the repatriation, and also compliance perspective if it is issued by the financial institution. So maybe perhaps we could also spend some time discussing along those lines. Cedric, over to you.
Sure. So you have to differentiate also what are the green or the bonds issued for. A country can start having a domestic bond market for its domestic investors. For example, its domestic pension funds, its domestic insurance companies, its domestic banks, and so on, and for its domestic retail investors as well. For that to exist, there needs to be a little bit of regulation put in place so that, coming from the central bank or from the local regulator, economic agents understand under what condition those securities can be issued and how these investors can invest in them. So that's very important because it sets the stage locally about the sources of investment that is available to the various investors. And it's a very normal step of the development of a country to facilitate the exchange of capital between people who save capital and people who invest capital. And this needs to be, regulated and organized. After that, there is another element is when domestic projects are looking for capital that is outside of the country. So outside investors are looking to different types of investment and different types of returns. And some of them have a mandate to invest in countries like Nepal, for example. And sometimes globally, their amount of capital is very large, which means that even if there is a very small portion of their portfolio that wants to invest in Nepal, for Nepal, it will be an important source of capital. And for that to exist, there is indeed a number of other parameters, like the country risk, for example, because these investors on their radar have the whole world in front of them and can choose different countries. So the country risk is very important. The currency exchange between their home country and Nepal is important as well. They will, they will be sensitive to the fluctuation in the foreign exchange rates, for example. They will be sensitive to their ability to repatriate capital if they put it into a project in Nepal. They will be concerned about the security that they can get if, for example, they extend a loan that is secured against a domestic asset. And so there is another level of complexity that can be addressed by putting policies in place so that foreign investors feel, that there are good opportunities of investment in Nepal. Maybe I should bring in Sundeep as well on your view, because I guess India is much more advanced on this journey of developing local and international flows of capital. So maybe you can complement on this.
Yeah,
Cedric?
Thanks, Cedric. So what has happened in India is the Securities and Exchange Board of India has released what it's known as green bond guidelines. So if a company issues green bonds, then it needs to follow those guidelines. Till now, most of the green bonds issued has been to offshore investors, which means there is somewhat a lesser incentive to issue bonds onshore within the INR market than the onshore market, than the offshore market. And the reason is that there is a lot of capital dedicated to green in the onshore European and American markets. So a company which issues an offshore bond, if it has an incentive to issue a offshore green bond. So a lot of offshore issuers have offshore issuers have issued green bonds, and they say privately that it allows them to have a pricing advantage. The other things which go in are, of course, a taxonomy, which Cedric talked about. So we are in the process of developing a taxonomy on a national scale as well. So people know what is green and what is not. SEBI's green bond guidelines make it somewhat clear, but that's a bit high level. That's not extremely detailed. And there has been a lot of talk about the central bank coming up with policies encouraging green financing of green, which then will create the assets which will then get refinanced in the bond market. But that hasn't happened yet, though, in spite of a lot of press reports, and reportedly because that needs a very sharply defined taxonomy. I mean, if you say that, okay, a green loan has this qualifications and these concessions, then people will try to force everything to look green. So the taxonomy needs to be very sharp, and I've heard that because the taxonomy is not there, we still don't have green financing norms. So yeah, here we are, from what I know, there was a government push directive to a lot of the government-owned institutions to issue green bonds, which kickstarted the market, and then the private sector has taken up. So these are some of the ways in which the issuance can be enhanced. What we are also trying to do locally is to get local green dedicated funds to come here in the INR market, which will start the Indian rupee green bond market as well. Thanks, Cedric.
Thank you very much. So if I am a project owner, I can be at various stages of development. Initially, I need equity investment to start it because there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of upside, but I'm happy to invest probably my own money plus a few friends. As the business develops, I can attract additional equity investment from investors that are also wanting to participate in the upside. As I develop further and build assets, I can start borrowing from banks. And at that stage, those loans that I get can start to be green if my projects are aligned with the framework. And then after a while, as the bank is hitting the maximum lending capacity to my business, at that point, it's possible to consider bond as a way to free finance or access extra capital from the organized market. And what we see is that sometimes it starts with the private debt market, where you have a group of bond investors that team up to lend to a business, or then it goes to the public market where it can be issued through a process of underwriting by banks. And as I said, it can start at the local level first in domestic currency, but then it can also go to the offshore market. And we've seen, for example, in the Philippines, the Bank of the Philippines Island that went as far as going to the Swiss franc market to issue a green bond. And they issued a green bond with a 0% interest. And the reoffer yield was negative, because we have this distortion currently in some markets where investors are getting a negative yield on their return on their fixed income investments. So naturally, these investors are going to look for positive return and higher return than what they can find in their home country. So as we can see from the case of the Philippines, the Swiss investor were happy to offer capital to a Philippine-based bank because the return was better than what they were able to find at home. And this is the kind of opportunity, and as Sundeep said, there are some green funds that are dedicated to green investments. So if you have green projects coming out of Nepal, there is the possibility that investors may start to get interested in those investments because they are green, but also because they offer a better return than what they have access to locally. It's still a stretch. It's still a market that is evolving. I'm not saying that all investors are rushing to put their money to work in Nepal, but that is the trend that we are trying, even at the regional level, to organize so that capital flows can start coming to green projects and really help accelerate this trend of building climate-aligned infrastructure in the region. Sanjeev, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, very good case studies both you and Sundeep presented. Like in terms of making Nepal ready for the green bond. So both of you are opining that there's a enabling environment has to be built. And Sundeep mentioned that the SEBI had come up with a guideline on the green bond, and RBI has some sort of loosely structured provision in place. So perhaps, since one of the goal of this platform is trying to, of course, like the domestic bond market, domestically raising fund is one, of course, one opportunity, but we're also trying to leverage, as I said, how could we, get the attention of the international investor, particularly, yes, of course, ROI-based interest, as well as ROI in terms of both bottom line, as well as ROI in terms of the environmental dividend. So in that, what kind of the enabling environment the government of Nepal or the regulators would have to come up with? So perhaps that is where we'd like to have more of insights from both of you.
I think, first of all, the regulation needs to be set correctly so that investors feel that their interests are protected, either locally, domestically, or from foreign investors.
So what would that be, Cedric?
So it means that the regulation exists. So there are some guidelines from the regulator about what is the definition of green bonds for Nepal. How is the regulator going to be considered? For example, we see very strict definitions in some markets, or for example, in Thailand, the regulator has issued only a directive saying you can follow international standards. You just need to tell us when you go to market with a green bond. So very kind of a light touch regulation. So it's up to the regulator to decide which way they want to go. There is the possibility of developing a taxonomy if you feel that's necessary, but a little bit of warning is that if the local taxonomy is very different from what investors are used to globally, they will not spend the time reviewing what is the Nepal taxonomy. They would much prefer that the global taxonomy is utilized because they are familiar with it. So sometimes it's easier to adopt the global standard. So having a regulation in place is very important. After that, also making sure that there is some initial issuance that comes from either the government or state-owned enterprises or the major banks in the countries is a very strong signal for the rest of the market to demonstrate how green bonds are issued. And once this takes place, we see a lot of headlines, a lot of press reports about this issuance, and then people start to get interested in those issuance.
Okay, thanks, Cedric. May I also request Vijay Singh Ji, who's the UNDP representative in the platform, to share his perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Sanjeev Ji. Thank you, Sanjeev Ji, and the colleagues here. I think in the beginning, when we thought to set up a platform on green financing, we were quite open because we did not have much ideas. I had a discussion with Sanjeev Ji, knowing that it is going to be a very priority area for everyone, for all of us. If you really want to support the government to meet the commitments of the Paris and the SDGs, so this is we need to have a tools to support this ongoing on. But now, first, thanks for organizing this the webinar on green bonds, Sanjeevji, and I appreciate the colleagues from Climate Bond Initiative, and UN colleague from Masato from UNESCO for very good presentation here. I think the question that I have, and that question is also to Cedric, maybe, and also Sanjeevji can also answer for the benefits of all the people who are here, and also the Masato can answer. Well, just put in a simple way, Nepal is at a very infantry stage of developing a green bond. And the country has gone into the federal context, so we have a 3-tier government system. So a lot of investments for infrastructure building is happening also through the provincial and the local governments. So there are challenges, but there are also opportunities to that. So we are also thinking from UNDP side when we talk about SDG localization and the commitment, meeting the commitment to the Paris Agreement, how we can support the provincial and local government. So in that context, I just want to know what could be a simple way to start the process. What things we can start. I'm not thinking of attracting the offshore market or the international financing coming to Nepal in the beginning to initiate that. And I agree with Cedric that I think it should be a first government-led or domestic-led green bond process. But to choose a simple project and to blend the things together into that and to float it like a green bonds initiative or something funded from the green finance that could produce a green results in the long term. How we should start with, what would be the area? I think you identified the 3 priority areas: the renewable energy, the transport, and infrastructure. I think they're quite important for Nepal. But then the other things, we don't have a proper regulation aid. We don't have we don't have the ready institution to start with. So how we should start? That is the one question that I have. Another question is, I want to ask my colleague from UNESCO. How do you see, I mean, from UNDP side, we are facilitating the process and we are very happy with that. We have set up a platform and the platform is engaging the different peoples and bringing them together in a discussion on green finance. That is so good. But I want to know that what role can UNDP play in future? That is, we have our corporate interest into that. So we want to see also that what role we can play to set up a green bond in Nepal or to keep it going in future. That is the second question that I have. And the third question is very much related to that, but I don't know because since I don't know much about the bond market, even there are the basic issues related to the bond is not known to me properly. So excuse me if I'm going to make a mistake. But just I want to know, I want to make a clarification between what is the difference between the green bond and the investment and the impact investment. Because I hear a lot from many colleagues, though the bond market hasn't started, there are people who are really ready to put their investment for the environment and social impact that is going to be produced in future from the investment being made now. So I just want to know whether my thinking is in the right way. If we don't have a green bond started here, can we go for the impact investment and we try to organize in that way that we can support some impact investment project on that? And anything you can, because I'm quite new to that, well, I appreciate your answer on that side. Thanks.
I think one thing that can be done first is to raise the awareness of people in Nepal, in the industry, in the financial system, and in the regulatory side as well of what is the green bond opportunity. So we do that through bootcamp sessions. For example, we have a 2-day workshop that is available that we do in several countries around the world, and that is by a group of 30 people. And it's a very good opportunity for everyone to better understand how this works, go into the details of the taxonomy, review some case studies, and so on. So that's one thing that is very easy to set up, and that the UNDP, we are already doing it for UNDP in a number of countries. I myself did it in Indonesia, for example. I went to Africa to do another one for UNDP as well. This is something that is readily available and could benefit a lot of people from Nepal. The other thing is about reviewing the regulations and legislation in Nepal And that's something that I've been also involved in some countries with UNESCAP and with Masato Abe as well, on how we can develop or advise on local regulators or governments on what they should do. Because obviously every regulation is heavily localized and depends on the local context. So there needs to be a review locally, and maybe UNDP can help in that process as well. The role of the UN is very important in putting people together, like we can see today. So having these discussions, training people, informing them, and helping them with the regulation, that's the main thing. But maybe Sundeep, you have some other elements to that as well.
Yeah, the boot camp is something which we have done for UNDP in India as well for municipal bonds. But what will be needed in Nepal is what Cedric said. I think what UNDP can do in Nepal is that it will have immense convening power to convene the right people in the government and the central bank and the other places to give them the right inputs about what needs to be done. I think that's where it can start. And I think you asked something about impact investments. So green bonds are, you can say, a subset of impact investments. Impact can be social, it can be about poverty, it can be about raising the healthcare. There could be a lot of things, and the instruments can be a bond or a loan or an equity or hybrid instrument. So green bonds actually enhance impact investments. And that is a separate thing which is not as well defined as green. Green is very sharply defined. Impact is a little bit loosely, but that also helps in the green course.
What is very important is that when we talk about green bonds, we talk about instruments that deliver a market return to investors. So investors are not expecting to get a concessional rate of return. They expect to get return that is in line with the rest of the market. When you talk to impact investor, they're also concerned about the social aspect of the project. And therefore, sometimes they're happy to get a lower return if this social impact exists as well. And I think it's slightly different in terms of the approach from investors. And the real opportunity of green bonds is that these are market instruments. Therefore, they appeal to the largest population of investors. They appeal to pension funds all over the world that have a mandate to invest in market instruments. And that's where the big pool of capital is available. The impact side is slightly smaller because these are people that have a philanthropic objective in mind. And also they are very important for any country to consider. They are not the largest pool of capital.
Well, hello everyone. I just have a little concerns and little update I wanted to make in terms of what is happening in context of Nepal. UNDP is our stakeholder in our work of accessing private sector, accessing finance for private sector for the climate related funds, and the instruments as we have been discussing here, equity, debt, and other kinds, guarantee kind of things, are the product line which we have been accessing by that mean to say how could a Nepalese private sectors can access those kind of funds. So in context, green bond have been identified as, of course, a very potential product, I would say, instrument, I would say, that we need to access. There are issues related to the internal regulatory regimes, which is governed by our Foreign Investment and Technologies Transfer Act 2019. That is it to be discussed with among our stakeholders. But where we are trying to have little insight on is in the experience of green bonds in similar markets like of Nepal. Maybe Sundeep ji can explain us better, or rather say can help us to understand things in detail. Like what we are actually looking for is, as you know, that when you say the green bonds, the market returns are not what should be ideally expected out of that. and who probably would be the investors in a green bond if it is issued in Nepal. We know that there probably will be the climate investors who will be investing in, but what would be their expected rate of return? First thing, I'm getting to the little specific in terms of, because we are making a strategy on that. We are trying to understand more on how does it go, and like there have been, I think we discussed on the foreign currency regime kind of thing. So if you could elaborate more a little bit on your experience of issuing bonds on other markets, it will be probably helpful for us to understand how does it is being functioning in others, and how could we make it function in Nepal.
I think the first bond from, I think NIFRA, right? That's the infrastructure bank. I think that will be a very good beginning. About investors, generally what happens is when you're doing a first bond, which is not necessarily a very high volume, a development financial institutions like an FMO or IFC or ADB, they can be the investors. That's what should be the first step, if you ask me for my opinion. So one of the earliest issuers of green bonds in India, which is Yes Bank, sorry, as of now it's not not the best name to say, had KFW investing, FMO investing, and there have been a few other transactions like that, which keeps it very simple, you know. And then if it is single investor, then you can start negotiating with that investor that, you know, let that investor take the currency risk. Or, you know, there is a firm called TCX, which is called the currency exchange, which actually comes into situations like Nepal's and offers a currency hedge where, you know, it's very difficult to get. That's the mandate. It's owned by development financial institutions. And if you cannot persuade the DFI to do a Nepalese rupee transaction, then you can possibly look at that look at them as providing a hedge, because that is their job. It is their job to go and provide hedges where they don't exist. So I'm speaking to them for providing a 30-year hedge for Indian green bonds. So that's where it would be. Let's start with the infrastructure bank. Let's see if there are some DFIs who, you know, 1 or 2 DFIs who can invest in the first bond. And if you can't persuade the first DFI investor to take your currency risk, let's have one risk provider and then see how we can kickstart the market beyond that. That would be my perspective.
And what had been the coupon rate?
See, the coupon rate is very much dependent on the risk of that particular issuer. So I think PwC will be advising this infrastructure bank, I think it's NIFRA, right? Yeah, NIFRA, about what will be its coupon rate. It's very case to case. It depends on the risk and, you know, how it is the demand, supply, and the, you know, the market situation at that point of time. I'll not be in a position to state it at the moment. And it also depends on the tenor.
Thank you very much, Sundeep. I think we are almost at the end of our session. Please, Masato, yes.
Yeah, because I had some people, you know, ask me to respond. You know, number one, you know, the first thing that if I you know, provide the technical assistance to the Nepal for the bond market development or issuing, right? Definitely, you know, I want to check on that, you know, how many or how, you know, big, you know, the green, you know, green development project exists. Climate, you know, development project, you know, project basis. Project is to borrow money, capital from somebody, right? And often financial institutions or individual investors to lend their capital to such a project some way, yeah, through the loan, normal loan, individual loan or bank loan and concessional loan, you know, government loan, and also bond and green, you know, green, you know, the climate bond, something like that. So as a first step, I think, you know, I want to see such a, you know, you know, project owners who could make a bankable, you know, development project, right? And to listen to them and link with the institutional investor. Institutional investors could be broad, you know, broad or rather limited. of course, the banking, financial sectors, and also other, the related, the financial, the sector, like insurance company, pension fund, housing development agency, something like that, Nepal has many. Actually, the Nepal portion is much better than some other, the smaller landlocked countries, if we compare, right? So if I'm as a project manager, project officer of the UN system in Kathmandu, definitely I try to making some linkage, encouraging the participation, both sides, demand and supply. Demand supply means the investor project, the investor side and the project developer side, right? To thinking about that, to making the linkage. Then regulation, taxation, other things is coming, right? By checking on the both sides, we should know what's the really critical bottlenecks. We cannot, fix the all bottlenecks overnight, but we might, picking up 3 to 5, critical bottlenecks. What is that? Actually, right? So we may not really need to have the market, Actually, in private, the institutional investors and the project developers, they could make the deal, directly, yeah. But by doing that, often we have some governance issues and lack of the transparency, some issue under the poor regulation legal framework. So we'll have some problem. However, the most important, the linkage is making the between investor side and the borrower side. If I was a project manager, I'm starting doing that. Start doing the closed door meeting, interviews, right? And once we got some framework, it's coming to the format, more bigger, the kind of a training or something like that at the municipal level or the national level. That's the first thing. And the second thing is my personal view onto the impact investment. In my view, impact investment is a kind of a way to sharing the risk for the betterment of the society, of the world. So far, right, if we take the Western, the economic series, right? We need to, or business series, we need to, investors is always seeking the higher profit, return on investment. That is so far we learned in the Western business school. But now we need to change our mindset to sharing some risk, investment risk, both the investor side and the borrower side for the betterment. Doing some good things, primarily and socially. That is my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are approaching the term of our discussion. It's been a very rich exchange. This is a first step, this is a first opportunity to discuss with each other. At Climate Bonds Initiative, we are available to answer some other questions you may have. Please consult our website, climatebonds.net, if you want to read about the publications we are putting out. There is an interesting report that we wrote on unlocking the potential in Indonesia, for example. There's a lot of very rich information in there on the barriers for FX and credit guarantees and so on. So that's something that you could look into. You can also look at the reports that we publish on the other markets. Yesterday, we published a major report on the Chinese green bond market, for example, both in English and in Chinese. You can read it. It's very instructive. We have other state of the market reports on other regions. You can see also from our website all the green bonds that have been issued with some details. So if you have questions, please reach out. We are here to answer you. And hopefully with Sanjeev, we will see to organize other sessions on other topics and hopefully maybe visit you in Kathmandu and organize a physical session as well. Maybe Sanjeev, I'll leave you the final word.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. I mean, the session has been very enriching and really, provided with a lot of insights and thoughts. And as you rightly said, this is the first formal interaction with the Climate Bond Initiative. We are in discussion to have the climate bond initiative and people like you come to Nepal as soon as the situation gets back to normal. So then we can have to face-to-face meeting with all the team members, all the platform members that are presented today. So thank you, Cedric, and thank you, Masato Abe, Mr. Masato Abe, and Sundeep Bhattacharya, and everyone, our regulators from Central Bank and the SEBON, and all the platform members, and my vice chair. So thanks to everyone. So with that note, perhaps we'll see you in person when we meet next time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.